What's up? I'm Vin, and today I want to take a look at this ASVAB Math Practice test from 2020. So let's get started. We have for question 1, x plus 9 equals 13, and we want to find x. Now, since this is multiple choice, we could just plug in, and if you think about it carefully, 4 plus 9 is 13, so we would just get choice B. If you want to show the algebra, you're starting with x plus 9 equals 13, and you're doing the opposite to get x alone. So if plus 9 is attached to x, just do minus 9 on both sides, and then you're just solving x equals 13 minus 9, which is equal to 4. So for question 1, we have choice B. Now for question 2, you need to know order of operations, and the mnemonic for it, PEMDAS, we say please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, tells you the order that you should be doing everything. So we have parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. So when I look at that expression here, we have 3 squared plus 4 times 5 minus 2. The first thing I see here is parentheses. We have 5 minus 2. So in the next line, what we have is we have 3 squared plus 4 times 5 minus 2 is 3. But then next, you notice we have an exponent here of 2. We have addition and we have multiplication. So we're going to do the exponent next. 3 to the second power is 9. So we have 9 plus 4 times 3. And then finally, we have multiplication that's going to be taking place before addition. 4 times 3 is 12. So we have 9 plus 12. And then that's just going to work out to 21. So we're going to get choice A. So for question 3, we want to multiply these two mixed numbers. And the best thing we could do is we could take something like 1 1/4 and write it as an improper fraction. So the trick is that you want to multiply 4 times 1, and then you're going to add the numerator to that product. So you have plus 1, and then it's going to be over the original denominator 4. So if you work that out, 4 times 1 is 4, plus 1 is 5, so you get 5/4. And if you go through the same process with 2 1/2, 2 1/2 is going to be equal to, we have 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5, and then we're dividing by the original denominator 2. So what we're really multiplying here is 5 over 4 times 5 over 2. And just know when you multiply fractions together, anytime you have something like a over b times c over d, just make sure you're doing the numerators multiplied divided by the product of the denominators. So we have 5 times 5 is 25, over 4 times 2 is 8. And once you get to this step, you're doing 25 divided by 8. And 25 divided by 8 is 3, and we would have 1 left over, and our denominator is 8, so we're going to have 3 1/8, which is choice D. Okay, now the reason why I know it's going to be 3 1/8, just know that 8 times 3 is equal to 24, and that's 1 away from 25. So for the next question here, this one I'm just going to kind of call shenanigans here. This is a sloppy question, because by definition, square roots are supposed to be positive, so the fact that the square root of 64, which should be 8, is not an answer choice. The next best answer, which they have in mind, is choice B, which is negative 8. And I want to say the thinking here is because negative 8 squared is equal to 64, they're arguing that square root of 64 is equal to negative 8. But we're not going to dive into the math theory. Just know this is the choice that they're going with and the reasoning that they're using. So for the next question here, we're going to evaluate this by direct substitution. But we want to know, what is the value of 2x to the third y squared? So we have 2x to the third y squared. And notice I just take the variables away. So I leave the x out and the y out. And we're replacing x with positive 2. And we're replacing y with positive 4. So using the order of operations all over again, we know that we should be doing parentheses and exponents first. So we have 2 times 2 to the third power is 8 times 4 to the second power is 16. And now the last thing we do is just multiply everything together. If we multiply 2 times 8, 2 times 8 is 16, so we have 16 times 16. And if you have your perfect squares memorized, awesome. Otherwise, just do the long multiplication. We have 6 times 6 is 36, and we carry a 3. 6 times 1 plus 3 is 9. And now we put a placeholder here. We have 1 times 6 is 6, and then 1 times 1 is 1. So now just add these numbers up. You have 6 plus 0 is 6. 9 plus 6 is 15, so we carry the 1, and we got 1 plus 1 is 2. So the answer to question 5 is going to be choice C. Now, question 6 I starred because there was a mistake on the practice test on the site and the PDF attached that this should be a minus 4y squared. On the site, it says minus 4y, but if it's just minus 4y, it's not going to work out to any of these choices. So the trick to doing a question like this, we want to add all of these polynomials up, is you want to just add the like terms together. So let's say I start with the x squared terms. Notice they are all lined up vertically here. So when I want to combine all of these common x squared terms, I'm just focusing on the coefficients, which are the numbers in front. So what I'm actually doing in my head is I'm just doing the numbers 3 plus 3, and then we have minus 5 minus 3. So if we work this out, we have 3 plus 3 is 6, and then we have minus 5 minus 3. And 6 minus 5 is 1, and then we have 1 minus 3 is negative 2. So this tells me that the number in front of x squared should be negative 2. And notice right now it's jumping out at me that choice D is the only reasonable one, because notice we have a minus 2x squared. But just to be safe, I'll show why the other terms are going to match up the way they should. So let's say now we focus on the xy terms. We have these terms here. So remember, the way we think about it is we just focus on the numbers in front. So you see we have 3xy. If there's no number there, it's going to be a 1. And then you have minus 2 plus 3. So when you add all this stuff up and subtract whatever you need to, you have 3 plus 1 is 4. See, that's the first two things I'm combining. 4 minus 2 is 2, and I have 2 plus 3 is equal to 5. So I should have 5xy's, which is definitely here in choice D. And then if we notice for the y terms here, let's say I just write those out. We have 4y plus 9y, and then we have minus 13y plus 1y. And if we work this out, 4 plus 9 is 13. And notice 13 minus 13 is 0, so we're just left with 1. So that's why for the y terms, notice there's a 1y. And if we focus on the last set here, why is there no y squared trailing at the end? It's because they should cancel out completely. So we have 2y squares plus 1y squared plus 1y squared minus 4y squared. And notice 2 plus 1 plus 1, this is all equal to 4. So this whole sum here is equal to 4, and 4 minus 4 is equal to 0. So this cancels out completely, which is why there's not a y squared term at the end. So we're going with choice D. Okay, for factoring, this is more of a mental math challenge where you're looking for two numbers that have a sum of negative 16 and have a product of 48. The trick is, though, that you should target the product first, because this is going to have a finite or a set list of numbers that multiply to 48. Now, a little trick here is when I'm looking for this product is I want both of my numbers to be negative, because remember, the product of two positive numbers is positive, but also the product of two negative numbers is positive. So if I wrote this list out positive, you'll see what I mean. I have 1 times 48 equals 48. Then I have 2 times 24. Then we have something like 3 times 16. And we have 4 times 12. And, you know, this list will go on. Next, we would have, let's say we have like 6 times 8 would be another pair. But the trick is, what you also have to think of simultaneously is which of these have a sum of 16, or in this case, negative 16. So you see, if I did the first pair, 1 and 48, they have a sum of 49. 2 plus 24 is equal to 26. 3 plus 16 is equal to 19. And then 4 plus 12 is equal to 16. So you see, like, this pair here is the one that jumps out that satisfies both. However, notice the sum is not positive 16. The sum is negative 16. So what you think about then is that the two numbers are going to be negative 4 and negative 12. Because if you think about it, negative 4 plus negative 12, that's going to be equal to negative 16. But when you multiply those two numbers, negative 4 times negative 12 is going to give us the positive 48 that we need. So then what do you do with this negative 4 and negative 12? Well, now you could say that y squared minus 16y plus 48 is equal to, you write your factors, and you've got a leading y here, and you have y minus 12, y minus 4. And it's going to be choice B. Now notice the order is flipped, but remember, with multiplication, order doesn't matter. Multiplication, the operation of multiplication is commutative, so order doesn't matter. Okay. Now just know this little add multiply trick only works when you have a 1y squared in front. Notice that there's an invisible 1 here. If it's something other than a 1, then you have to rely on a different method, but this is the method here when you have a 1y squared. Okay, solving this equation for x, the idea is you want to just do inverse operations on both sides until you get x alone. And one of the first things I look for with equations like this is if there's an x term on both sides. And notice we have a 12x on the left and 8x on the right. So one of the first things we should do here is get all the x terms on one side. But I want to move the 8x over because 8 is a smaller number than 12. So if I do minus 8x on both sides, that's going to leave me with positive numbers here. Notice 8x minus 8x is 0, cancels out. On the right side, I'm just left with 10. But now I've got 12x minus 8x. I'm just combining like terms. 12 minus 8 is 4, and I have my variable x attached. The plus 6 follows, but now remember the goal is to solve for x. So I want to get rid of this plus 6. The opposite of plus 6 is minus 6. So we subtract 6 on both sides, and now we have 4x is equal to 4. Now to solve for x, we just divide both sides by 4 because this 4 is attached to x by multiplication, and the opposite of multiplication is division. And now we have x equals 4 divided by 4 is 1, so we're going with choice A. Now just so you know, a very common mistake here is that when people get to this step, some people go to do like minus 4 on both sides. Now I know 0 is not an answer choice, but the reason why we're not doing minus 4 is because that would be if it was x plus 4 is equal to 4. Then you would do minus 4. Okay, so just once again, make sure that you're doing the correct operation to cancel out the term in your equation. So for this question, we have a system of equations, and solving these can be a bit tricky, but the goal with system of equations is to get terms to cancel out. So what I mean by this is I want to get rid of either an x or a y variable. Now the one that I choose to get rid of has a lot to do with which ones have matching terms. And notice I have a 3x here and I have a 3x here. But my goal when I'm solving systems of equations is I want to generate something that we call matching opposites. Now what this means is that notice we have a 3x, but I would like one of them to say minus 3x. That way I could add it together. So what you could do in a system is you could multiply one equation by the same number all the way throughout. So you'll see what this does. So I'm going to take this equation here and just rewrite it. We've got 6y plus 3x equals 39. But if I multiply the top equation by -1, now I have minus 3y. -1 times 3x is minus 3x. And -1 times 24 is -24. So what I could do now is I could add these equations together. I have 6y plus -3y is like doing 6 minus 3, which is 3. I have 3x plus -3x canceling out, giving me plus 0x equals, now if I do 39 plus -24, that's going to give me 15. So now my resulting equation, I have 3y equals 15. So when I solve for y by dividing by 3, I have y is equal to 5. And notice the only answer choice with y equals 5 is this one. But just to be 100% sure that we did this correctly, what we should do is plug y equals 5 back into one of the original equations and see if you get x equals 3. So let's say I start with 3 times y plus 3x equals 24. If we plug in y equals 5, see what we have. We have 3 times 5 is 15 plus 3x equals 24. Now we subtract 15 on both sides. And we've got 3x equals 24 minus 15 is 9. And when you divide this by 3, you've got x equals 3. So it's definitely choice C here for the system of equations question. Okay, for the next question here, you just have to know the law of exponents. When you divide two exponent terms that have the same base, so notice they have the same base, matching terms a, then you could evaluate this by doing a to the b minus c power. So if we look at this, x to the 12 divided by x to the 4 is equal to x, because we have same base here, to the 12 minus 4, which is x to the 8th power. So this is going to be choice B. So we want to solve this equation for y. So this is like the factoring quadratic question we had before, except now we have to go the extra step and actually solve out. So the first thing you want to do with a question like this is you want to make one side equal 0. So I'm going to make the right side equal 0 by adding 10 to both sides. So now we get to this step. We have y squared, just make that a little neater, y squared plus 7y plus 10 is equal to 0. But remember what we said before, the shortcut is you're looking for two numbers that have a sum of 7 and have a product of positive 10. So if you think about this very carefully, the two numbers are going to be 5 and 2. Now why is it 5 and 2? Because 5 plus 2 is equal to 7. There's our sum. And 5 times 2 equals 10. There's our product. So now I could write this as y plus 5 times y plus 2 is equal to 0. But if you think about this carefully, the only way for the product of two numbers to be equal to 0 is one of those numbers has to be 0. So the possibilities here is that either the y plus 5 factor equals 0, or we could have the y plus 2 factor is equal to 0. So if you solve this equation by just doing minus 5 on both sides, your first solution here is y equals negative 5. So it's already looking like choice A. And our second solution we would get by doing minus 2 on both sides, and we have y equals negative 2, which matches choice A. So for question 12, there was a mistake on the practice test from the website and the PDF. Just know choice D should say 12y over 55x. The answer choice they originally have for D makes it so that there's no answer to question 12. But to answer question 12, what you want to do when you multiply fractions is you want to multiply the numerators together. So you have 6y times 2 divided by, and then you multiply the denominators together. You have 11 times 5x. So to simplify this, you have 6y times 2 is 12y, and in the denominator, 11 times 5x is 55x. So from this step here, we could see that it's 12y over 55x. So this is going to be choice D. Now for question 13, when you divide fractions, the phrase to remember is keep, change, flip. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep the first fraction the same. This is equal to 6x over 11. We change the operation from division to multiplication, and then we flip that last fraction to 5y over 2. So now when we simplify this, there's a nice little thing you could do. Notice we have a 6 in the numerator and a 2 in the denominator. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So we could reduce this beforehand. And then you have 3x times 5y over, and you have just 11 left. And if you do the product of the numbers, 3 times 5 is 15, and you have x times y is just xy. Over 11, this is going to give you choice B. So cube root of 27 has potential to be easy. What you need to think about is what number times itself 3 times is equal to 27. And if you start off with the first few numbers, start with 1. 1 times 1 times 1 is 1. If you go next to 2, this product is going to give you 8. And then finally, if you go to 3, this product is going to give you 27. So the cube root of 27 is equal to 3. This is going to be choice A. Now for this one, these could be a bit tricky because we're solving an equation, but we have all variables. We are used to having just one variable and the rest numbers, but in this case we have 3 variables. So we're trying to solve for the variable g. So all you have to think about here is what is attached to g and how could you get rid of it. So when we look at this, we say, all right, well, h is attached to g and it's attached by division. And then you ask yourself, what is the opposite of division? The opposite of division is multiplication. So what we're going to have here is we're going to multiply both sides of this equation by h. And that's going to get rid of this dividing by h piece over there. So you have h over h canceling, which tells you g is equal to a times h, which matches choice C. So this next question here is all definition. Which of the following is an equilateral triangle? Well, the key word here is equi. That just means equal. And we're looking for a triangle which has 3 sides. So if we're looking for an equal triangle, we're looking for a triangle with all 3 sides equal, which is going to be choice D, because notice this triangle is drawn in such a way that all 3 sides are the same. Choice B, this is a right triangle because it has this 90-degree angle here. And this one looks like an isosceles triangle because 2 sides are the same, but the third side is different. So now we move on to question 17. We have, what is the perimeter of the following rectangle? Now the perimeter is, remember, we just do a sum of all the sides. And one of the other things you have to know here is that if this is a rectangle, the opposite sides are the same. So if this side here is 9 meters, opposite here is also 9 meters. And if this vertical side here is 3 meters, then this side over here also has to be 3 meters. So then the perimeter of this rectangle is just the sum of all the sides. So we're doing 9 meters plus 9 meters, and then we have a side that's 3 meters, and we have another side that's 3 meters. So if we work this out in groups, we have 9 plus 9 is 18, and then we have 3 plus 3 is equal to 6, and now when you add these two numbers together, 18 plus 6 is 24. So the perimeter should be 24 meters. For the next question here, we want to know what is the circumference of the following circle. So when you're finding the circumference of a circle, the equation you need to know is circumference equals 2 times pi times r, where r is the radius of the circle. You also have this equation, which will tell you the circumference, which is circumference equals pi times diameter. But these are the exact same thing because it uses the idea that the diameter is twice the length of the radius. Remember, the diameter of a circle goes from one end all the way to the other, and it goes through the center. But in this case here, we have a radius of 4 meters because this value, once again, it started at the center and it wound up at one point on the circle. So to find the circumference here, we're going to plug in r equals 4. So you have the circumference is 2 times pi times 4 meters. So the circumference is going to be 2 times 4 is 8. It's going to be 8 pi meters. But notice the answer choices are not in terms of pi, it's in decimal form. So we're going to use the idea that pi equals 3.14159, and it goes on and on. It's irrational, so there's no rhyme or reason to pi. But there is a little trick we could use here. Notice that pi is a little bit bigger than 3, which means that pi is between 3 and 4. So if you think about this carefully, whatever the circumference is, notice that 8 pi is we're multiplying pi by 8. So think about this very carefully. If I did 8 times 3, that would give me 24. If I did 8 times 4, that would give me 32. And remember what we said before, pi is between 3 and 4. So if 8 times 3 is 24 and 8 times 4 is 32, then 8 times pi has to be somewhere between 32 and 24. And the only answer choice that falls exactly between 24 and 32 is choice C. Now look, you could go ahead and take 8 and multiply it by 3.14. You could do 3.14 times 8, and this is going to give you 25.12 exactly. But I just think this is like a nice little approximation method that gets you the exact answer without having to do all this extra work here. So for question 19, we're told in the following equilateral triangle, what is the measure of angle 1? Well, just know in an equilateral triangle, all sides are equal. Well, we'll say congruent. This means congruent, which means all the sides have the same measure. But we also know that all angles are the same. So in a triangle, there are 3 angles, and the sum of all the angles is 180 degrees. So if all the angles are the same, we just divide 180 by 3, and we get 60 degrees. That tells you the measure of each of these angles is 60 degrees. So the measure of angle 1 would be choice C, 60 degrees. Now in question 20 here, we have angle 1 is 34 degrees. So I'll put 34 degrees over here by angle 1. And we want to know what is the measure of angle 2. Well, one of the concepts you need for this is that on a straight line, the sum of the angles is 180 degrees. So what that tells me is that 34 degrees plus, and this symbol just means the measure of angle 2. This refers to the measure of the angle, is equal to 180 degrees, because once again, anytime you have a straight line, and notice angle 1 over here and angle 2 together, they build a straight line together like this. So this tells us the sum of these angles is 180, so to solve for the measure of angle 2, just subtract 34 degrees on both sides. And this tells us the measure of angle 2 is equal to, and this is going to work out to 146. If you want to see this worked out, we're going to borrow from this column here. We're going to make this a 7, and then you have 10 minus 4 is 6. You got 7 minus 3 is 4, and the 1 just carries down. So the measure of this angle is 146 degrees, which is choice C. So we have a right triangle here, and you want to know what is the length of side AB. Well, just know for any right triangle that anytime you have these 3 sides here, the Pythagorean theorem holds, where we have a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And just know the lone side that's being squared, that's always the hypotenuse. And if you want to know how do you find the hypotenuse, it's always opposite the right angle. So these two we call the legs, and the hypotenuse is here. So just know we take the square of the legs and add them together, and that's equal to the hypotenuse squared. So if you think about it here, we could say 4 squared plus 3 squared and call this side c is equal to c squared. So when we work this out, remember when we do exponents before addition, we have 16 plus 9 equals c squared. 16 plus 9 is 25. And if you want to solve for c, the opposite of squaring something is taking the square root. And the square root of 25 is equal to 5. So the missing side is 5 meters. Now for the next part here, we want to find the area of the following triangle. And just know the area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height. But one of the little details you need to know here is that the base and height should be perpendicular to each other, or they should form a 90-degree angle. So in this case here, you could technically say this more than one way, but this looks like a height because it's going vertical here, so we could just name that one as our height. Our height is 4 feet, and our base is 8 feet. So if we want to find the area of this triangle, we're just doing 1/2. The base is 8 feet, and the height is 4 feet. So we could simplify this a bit. We could do half of 8 is equal to 4. So if we do 1/2 times 8, that's 4, and then 4 times 4 is 16. Feet times feet is feet to the second power, which we call square feet. So we have 16 square feet, which is choice D. So for question 23, we want to know what is the diameter of the following circle. Well, just know the diameter of a circle is equal to 2 times the length of the radius. So here they gave us the radius because we have the distance from the center to one point on the circle. And once again, the diameter goes from one end of the circle to the other. So that's why it's 2 times the radius. And in this case here, to find the diameter, we're just doing 2 times 80 centimeters. And if you double 80, that's going to give you 160. So the diameter is 160 centimeters. Okay, for question 24, these questions could be a little bit tricky, but if you know what to look for, it simplifies it a bit. So we have lines A and B are both parallel. So these two lines here are parallel, which means they're going in the same direction and they would never intersect if we just look at them forever. And they're telling us that these two parallel lines are intersected by line C, and they told us the measure of angle 2 is 30 degrees. So this angle over here is 30 degrees, and we want to know what is the measure of this angle down here, angle 7. So a little trick to these questions, just know that all the small angles, which we'll abbreviate angles with this, are congruent or they're equal. They're all the same. And we could say all the big angles are congruent as well. So just by looking at this, and what I mean by small angle, this angle over here is a small angle because it's acute. You see that this one here is, if I drew a 90-degree angle here, this angle is less than 90. And something like angle 1, this is a big angle. So you see, angle 2 is a small angle. Angle 7 is also a small angle. So this would also be 30 degrees. If I wanted to find, let's say, angle 1, notice angle 1 and angle 2 form a straight line. So I would say, all right, the measure of angle 1 plus angle 2 is 30 degrees, has to equal 180. Tells me if I subtract 30 on both sides, the measure of angle 1 is 150. So technically, this angle is 150. This is a big angle here at 4. That's 150. This here would be 30 degrees. And then if this is 30, this angle would be 30, and then these would be 150. So it depends on which angle they ask you for, but once again, all the small angles are the same, all the big angles are the same. But since they want to know what is the measure of angle 7 is a 30-degree angle. So for the last question here, we want to find the volume of a cylinder that has a height of 15 meters and a radius of 5 meters. So we have h equals 15 meters, and we have r is equal to 5 meters. And the formula for the volume of a cylinder is pi times r squared times h. So then we just plug in, we have pi, and a little trick here, just know that I'm not going to plug the units in here until the end. So notice the units at the end are cubic meters, or meters to the third power, because volume is 3 dimensions. So I'm just going to worry about plugging in the numbers. So you see I have r squared, so I'm going to plug in 5. But once again, the unit I'm just writing at the end altogether as cubic meters, which matches the answer choices. And now we have h is equal to 15 meters, but once again, the units we're just writing all at the end over here. So now we just have to work out all of this stuff. We have volume equals pi times, and notice here I'm going to have 25 times 15, which we could work that out on the side here. 25 times 15. We have 5 times 5 is 25, so we carry a 2. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 2 is 12. We put a placeholder here, and we have 1 times 5 is 5, 1 times 2 is 2. So you add all this up, you got 5, 7, 3. So this tells us that you have pi times 375 cubic meters. Now for this test, I've noticed that the pi they want you to use, they want you to stop at 3.14. I know technically this goes on 15926, whatever, but pi is roughly equal to 3.14. That's what we're going to use to solve this out. So I'm doing 375 times pi, or I'm doing 375 times 3.14. Now for this question, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ignore 2 decimal places. So at the end, I have 2 decimal places that I'm going to have to pay back. So now let's just go ahead and go through with this long multiplication. We're going to have 5 times 4, or 4 times 5 is 20. So we have a 0. We carry a 2. 4 times 7 is 28. Plus 2 is 30. So we have a 0. We carry our 3. And now we have 4 times 3 is 12. 12 plus 3 is 15. So now we go to the next row here, but we put a placeholder. We have 1 times 5 is 5. 1 times 7 is 7. 1 times 3 is 3. And now for the next row, we put 2 placeholders. So we're starting at 3. We have 3 times 5 is 15. We carry a 1. We can ignore this one. 3 times 7 is 21. Plus 1 is 22. So we carry a 2 here. We could get rid of the old one we had before. And now we have 3 times 3 is 9. Plus 2 is 11. So now we just add all this stuff up. We got 0 plus 0 plus 0. 0 plus 5 plus 0 is 5. You have 5 plus 7 is 12. 12 plus 5 is 17, so we're going to carry a 1. 1 plus 1 plus 3 is 5, plus 2 is another 7, and then we have a 1 here and a 1 here. But remember what we said, we ignored 2 decimal places. See, we ignored 2 decimal places. We did 375 times 314. So now we just have to pay those 2 decimal places back, and we're going to get 1177.50. And if we scroll back up, that's going to correspond to choice B. That's our answer to the last question. Okay, well, this is going to conclude this video on the ASVAB math practice. If you found this video to be helpful, please like and subscribe. It really helps me grow the channel. And if you got any requests, just leave the topics you want me to cover in the comments section below. And thanks for watching.